Elias Wren had never meant to become anything more than a maintenance engineer aboard the Solace, Earth's first long-range diplomatic starcruiser. The job was steady, quiet, and, most importantly, located as far from political drama as possible. He preferred wires and fusion coils to conversations. Machines made sense, people didn't. That changed the day the ship made first contact with the Zephyrians. The Zephyrians were an ethereal race, tall, bioluminescent beings who shimmered in pale blues and violets. They breathed a thin, ionized atmosphere and communicated through both words and resonant melodies. The meeting was supposed to be a simple cultural exchange. But things rarely went as planned on the frontier. Elias was off shift when the alarms blared. Medical emergency in the diplomatic bay, the ship's AI intoned. All personnel with basic field med certification report immediately. Elias had taken the course only because his supervisor insisted, but he rushed toward the bay. When he arrived, a crowd of tense crew members surrounded a collapsed Zephyrian delegate, a young woman whose skin flickered erratically, as though her light were dying. "She's hemorrhaging internally," the ship's doctor said, voice desperate. "Their biology uses a plasma-like life fluid. But we don't have any compatible synthetic supply." Captain Arden turned sharply. "Are you saying we can't help her?" "Not unless we find someone whose blood proteins can stabilize her system temporarily," the doctor said. "But the odds of cross-species compatibility are..." Elias didn't remember volunteering. He remembered stepping forward. He remembered saying he'd do it. And he remembered the doctor staring at him as though he'd lost his mind. Minutes later, he was lying on a med table, his arm hooked up to a converter device that filtered his blood through a rapid synthesis machine. The hybrid plasma was carefully pumped into the Zephyrian woman. Her light grew steadier. Her breathing evened out. And when her eyes finally opened, brilliant, swirling with turquoise and silver, she stared directly at Elias. Then everything went black. When Elias woke hours later in the medical ward, his arm throbbed, his head ached, and several officers stood around his bed. Captain Arden smiled. "You saved a diplomat's life today, Wren." "I did," he muttered. Before the captain could answer, soft footsteps approached. The Zephyrian woman stepped into view. She stood taller than most humans, her glowing skin now steady and bright. She inclined her head, a gesture the crew had already learned was one of respect. "I am Lyra Ven of the Shimmering Choir," she said, her tone gentle but layered with harmonic overtones. "Your blood carries stabilizing properties rare among your kind. It saved me." Elias's cheeks warmed. "I'm glad you're okay." Her luminous gaze studied him with startling intensity. "A life debt among my people is sacred. We believe a gift of survival must be honored with a gift of meaning." "That's not necessary." "It is tradition," she interrupted softly, "and law. And I intend to repay it." He wasn't sure what to say, so he said nothing at all. Lyra Ven didn't leave his side for the next 2 days. At first Elias thought it was just Zephyrian procedure, but her presence felt intentional. She asked endless questions, about engineering, about human senses, about music, about fear, about why he volunteered without hesitation. Elias shrugged at that last question. "You were dying." "I was there." It didn't seem right to stand back. Lyra bowed her head again, touched. "Most species hesitate when faced with the unknown. You moved forward. That is rare beyond measure." Rumors spread quickly through the Solace. Some crew members joked the alien diplomat had adopted Elias. Others speculated it was romance, though both humans and Zephyrians dismissed that quickly. Cross-species interest wasn't unheard of, but Lyra's approach carried no suggestion of intimacy. Instead, it felt ceremonial, almost spiritual. The truth became clear on the final day of the diplomatic mission. The Zephyrian delegation invited the Solace crew to witness a ceremony of meaning. Few knew what it entailed, but curiosity filled the air. In the crystalline chamber of the Zephyrian vessel, 100 bioluminescent beings stood in concentric rings, humming in soft resonance. Elias stood at the center beside Lyra, who held a small crystalline sphere. "Elias Wren," she began, her voice echoing melodically through the chamber, "you gave me life when mine was ending." Among the Zephyrians, such an act binds two fates together, not in servitude but in shared purpose. Elias swallowed. "I don't think I understand." She lifted the sphere. "This is a core shard, taken from the energy lattice of our homeworld. To our people, it is a symbol of trust, a symbol of kinship, and a symbol of future paths intertwined." The humming around them deepened. "This gift," she continued, "is offered only once in a generation to an outsider. It grants the bearer open passage to any Zephyrian world, unconditional protection under our laws, and, for you alone, an invitation to join our choir as an honored liaison." Elias froze. Lyra stepped closer, her glow softening. "This is not repayment. This is recognition. You acted beyond fear. You saw me not as alien but as someone worth saving. So I offer you what no human has been offered, a place among us when you choose to claim it." He stared at the sphere. "Lyra, this is too much." "It is exactly enough," she said gently. "Because your act was immeasurable." The chamber pulsed with warm light, as though the entire ship exhaled. Elias reached out with trembling fingers and took the core shard. The sphere vibrated subtly in his palm, resonating with energy he couldn't fully comprehend. The choir hummed in harmonious approval. For a long moment, Elias simply stood there, overwhelmed. He had expected gratitude, maybe a handshake, maybe a few kind words. He had never imagined something that felt like being adopted by an entire civilization. Lyra touched her forehead to his, a Zephyrian sign of deep respect. "Where your journey leads," she said softly, "know that you have a people among the stars." When the Solace returned to human space weeks later, Elias still carried the core shard. It sat safely in a containment case, glowing gently at night like a tiny piece of another universe. His life returned to routine. Maintenance checks, calibration reports, late-night fixes of systems nobody else wanted to crawl through. Yet everything felt different. He wasn't just a nameless engineer anymore. He was someone who had saved a life across species, and been honored in a way no human ever had. Sometimes he wondered what it would be like to visit the Zephyrian homeworld, to hear the choir sing, to fulfill the invitation Lyra had given him. And though he didn't know when he would go, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next time his path crossed Lyra's, it wouldn't be as a rescuer or a stranger. It would be as something far greater. A human whose kindness had reshaped the destiny of two worlds, and the bearer of a reward no one could have ever expected.